I know you're going to find this hard to believe, but everything the diet industry has told you about weight loss is only about half true. And if you're one of those people who is really trying to lose those last 10, 15, 20, we'll take it all the way up to 25 pounds, and they just won't come off, maybe that half truth that the industry is telling you is actually working against you. And so today, we're going to dive a little deeper into my article from the weekend. So if you haven't read it yet, go to my Substack, it's probably in your inbox, and take a read of Freedom to Eat More and Lose Weight. And if you have, you already know the headline that we're going to be talking about, right? I actually want you eating more, not less. And this is something that I struggle with as well, right? As a fitness professional. So I can only imagine what the average person has to deal with. And now let's keep in mind, I'm not talking morbidly obese, my 1,000-pound life on TLC. That's not it. What I'm talking about are the people who have lost a fair amount of weight or maintained, that 10 to 20 pound margin of where their ideal body weight is, right? And I want to show you today exactly why that approach just doesn't work. And we're going to take it macro by macro. We're going to go through proteins, fats, carbs, and how managing those and optimizing those can lead to the composition change, the body composition change that you're actually chasing. What's up and welcome back, everybody. I'm glad you're here again with me this week. Now, if you're new here, I'm Jenny. I coach ex-athletes and busy adults, one and the same more often than not. And my clients are the ones who want to get strong, stay healthy, and actually maintain that for as long as possible, right? Not just for a 12-week challenge or anything like that. So if that's you, my friend, are in the right place. So a quick refresher on the article before we get into the meat of this today, right? You probably don't need to lose weight. And I'm going to use weight as a general term because if I were to chop your leg off, as I once heard a famous coach say, then yeah, you would lose weight. What you need to do is lose fat, right? When you lose fat, you also want to maintain your muscle because muscle is the truly only metabolically active tissue in the body when we're comparing fat to muscle. Okay, so lean tissue here is the thing that burns fuel. And while you're trying to lose fat, I also want you to keep your energy high so that you can actually live your life. Because I'm sure you've been on a diet before where you've cut carbs, you've gone full keto, and then you feel like absolute dog for a couple weeks and then you give up, right? That's not how I want you living your life. That's not how you should want to live your life. And this is the game that we're gonna play. And the line that I use the most with my clients is that, yeah, you don't need to lose fat. You probably need to build muscle. Because when you do lose fat and you don't have any muscle to layer onto your bones, you just look like a sack of skin. So when you listen to this and you start to put some of these things into place and practice, I want you, the next time you step onto the scale, to say that back to yourself in case it hasn't moved. Because when you gain muscle and lose fat, the scale probably actually isn't going to move much at all. But the difference will be when you have a fair amount of muscle hiding underneath your fat, that changes how you look when you start to peel that fat back. It also changes how your clothes fit. And more importantly, how your metabolism operates to keep you healthy, awake, and energized, okay? The thing that I see too often is that we end up restricting ourselves into just feeling like poop, and then the scale doesn't change, we get pissed off, we give up, and the cycle continues. But when we look at fat loss as what happens on the way when you do the muscle part right, that's the path that we want to be on, okay? That's where all the magic happens, is when you focus on building muscle, you typically have more energy, you're more often able to do more throughout the day. Fat's going to take time to come off, but the good news is it's coming off and you are making progress, whether that scale moves or not. Okay, so let's take some time and break down exactly what proteins, carbs, and fat are actually doing for you. Because if you don't understand the job each one of those macronutrients has, you're probably going to keep cutting the wrong one. All right, so like I mentioned, we're going to start with protein because protein is the non negotiable. When you are watching Naked and Afraid on a Saturday afternoon because you have nothing else to do, what is the number one thing that they seek out after shelter and fire? Well, it's protein. I gotta get protein. Well, water's in there as well. But if you just had those four things, fire, shelter, protein, and water, you could live for a long time without clothes in the jungle somewhere in South America. But when you think of protein, right, protein is that raw material. If you're thinking about building a house, protein are the drywall and 2x4s and the things that build the structure in which you shape the house around. And so when you don't supply the house with enough building materials, that's going to be a pretty shaky house. And the same thing happens when you're trying to build your body up. Okay, if you don't provide it with enough of the right materials, you're not able to build a body. And so I end up telling a lot of my clients the same thing, right? It's hard to sculpt a pebble. So many of my clients over the years have cut down their entire amount of eating to a point where there's nothing left to cut. And so when we're talking about building muscle, I actually want you to start eating a little bit more so that then we have a boulder and not your body as a weight and shape of a boulder, but as a center for materials that we can start peeling away over time. Because if you're not giving your body enough protein, there's not enough there to shape much of anything. And you can train as hard as you want, but you're still only working with that pebble rather than working with a boulder when you're trying to sculpt your masterpiece. All right, so a lot of my clients, especially the more recently, the ones I've picked up, they've played sports, but now they've kind of fallen into the trap of the NARP. And you guys have heard me talk about NARPs, the non-athletic regular people, before. But these folks, these women have come to me eating, 60, 80, max 100 grams of protein a day, and that's spread across 3 meals and a snack. And a lot of times their menu starts to look like a salad and an apology. Well, I had a salad with some chicken on it, and I'm sorry, I didn't eat all the chicken on it. Bro, I get it, right? The protein piece is a little bit scary for people. It has that reputation of being a bro macro, thanks to our bodybuilding friends. And that's okay. But we also have to remember some of those bros were on other enhancing agents that made them look the way they are. But if we're able to build muscle, we're better able to maintain our hormone levels. And so for some of the guys who want to get huge, it's a lot easier for them to eat the protein. But for the ladies, it's like, oh no, that 3-ounce sirloin that I had at dinner last night, it just really filled me up. And I'm not making fun. Like, these are direct quotes, maybe a little paraphrasing, of women that I've talked to over the years. I just can't, I eat like a bird, But it's one of those things, it is a skill to be able to eat enough to support the active lifestyle that you want to carry. Because the truth is, for the ladies that are giving me a salad and an apology, you can't get beefy eating leafy, right? That lettuce isn't building your shoulders, it's not building your back, it definitely ain't building your glutes. The thing that you need to reveal your abs and build the peach of your dreams is going to be the protein, is going to be the meat source, because that's also going to be the thing that makes your metabolism work harder at rest. The body doesn't have to work hard at all to digest fats and carbs, but it does have to create additional heat to break down the protein. Okay, so what are the jobs of protein? Well, protein has more than just one, right? It actually has 3 jobs, okay? The first one, it repairs the muscles you break down in your training session. Now, there's a caveat to that. You actually have to be working hard enough to break those tissues down, which we'll have to cover in another conversation. The second piece is it helps keep you feeling full or satiated, so then you're not white-knuckling yourself through the afternoon. All right, everybody gets to that 2 o'clock feeling of, Oh my God, I'm so hungry. Maybe I should get another coffee. No, I'm going to go get a snack. Nope, no snack. I'm just going to pace and hope that there's nothing sweet put down in front of me, right? So you feel fuller for longer. And like I mentioned, it creates heat. It has the highest thermic effect of any of the macronutrients, meaning that your body burns more calories just digesting it rather than kind of doing it passively. That's just how digestion works. So the target range that I use for my clients when we're talking protein is 0.8 to 1 gram per pound of body weight. There's nothing exciting about this. This is found and proven in all of the literature. And if you were to translate that into grams per kilogram, for those of you who are outside freedom units, that's 2.2. So 2 to 2.2 grams per kilogram of protein per pound of body weight. If you're even able to eat on the lower end, the 0.8, so if you're a 200-pound person, that means you're eating 160 grams of protein. If you're within that 15-pound window of your goal weight, this is the way to go. Now, if you're 100 pounds, so say you're 300 pounds and you're trying to eat 300 grams of protein a day, that's too much, right? So we have to realize, okay, we have to realize the situation we're in. So if we're more on the obese side of things, we need to figure out what that goal weight is and eat towards that. Another option would be to get your body composition measured and eat 1 gram per pound of lean body mass that you carry. And that also gets you to a more manageable thing. So there is a caveat, put an asterisk by protein, and that you weigh 300 pounds. Unless you are 300 pounds lean, striated glutes, and vascular, you're not going to be able to do that. But if you can eat, if you're on the heavier side, if you can eat 130 to 160 grams of protein, you're going to be in the ballpark of feeling full, getting that thermic effect of food, and you're not going to want to snack because you're going to feel full, right? So you're staying satiated. And if you're training on top of all of it, now you're repairing your muscle and building new. And even though the scale may only change slightly on that extreme end, you're still going to see a little bit of a difference. All right, so protein, the non-negotiable. That moves us into carbs. Now, this is the most vilified macronutrient of them all, right? If you were to go back, take a flashback to the 80s, it was fat-free everything. The 90s into the early 2000s, low carb, right? The South Beach diet, Atkins, anything that said, you know what, maybe carbs are the issue, carbs are what is making us fat. Nah, dog, like this villain needs to be turned into a hero really quick. And the reason is, as bad as I hate to say it, carbs are fuel, right? Anytime you do anything physically intense, your body turns into a carb burning machine. And if you don't have carbs in your body, then your performance sucks. Like, there's a reason in college they would carb fuel us going into a game the next day. Soccer did it, basketball did it, football does it, track and field, especially the distance pieces, right? They use carb fueling as a strategy. And if you look at those bodies, eating 300 to 500 grams of carbs, sometimes in one sitting, they look pretty damn fit. They're not fat. But you also have to remember the amount of activity that these folks are doing is extremely high, which means their carbs also need to be extremely high. Well, when we get to where we are, where we're kind of in this middle, where we're somewhat active, but we have sedentary jobs, the carbs that we need, the amount of carbs that we need to fuel are much lower, right? But we do need those carbs around our workouts because it's the first line of performance, okay? Your muscles store carbs. So that's stored as glycogen. So that's just glucose, aka carbohydrate, in the muscle. The other thing is glucose, which is what a lot of people worry about. So blood sugar, that's glucose. That's what kind of floats around in our system. And those are the two types of fuel that let us perform that fourth or fifth hard set of an exercise and it prevents us from falling apart on the first few, right? So when you go to cut carbs, say, oh no, I'm going low carb, I'm skipping bread, I'm skipping pot, like you can do that and that's fine, but only if your entire diet consists of those things. And if your entire diet consists of processed foods that are found in the middle of the grocery store, making some of these swaps will be a little bit difficult at first, but you will be the one who benefits the most from today's conversation, especially if you start training in addition to it, okay? So when you go to cut carbs, so say you're in this middle group, okay? And you go to cut carbs, you cut them really hard, like you take them down to like 75 to 100 grams per day, your workouts actually suffer. Your recovery also suffers. And your body starts to pull from muscle tissue for fuel instead of fat, right? So what ends up happening, you break down the amino acids that make up the proteins that make up the muscles, and the body starts to preserve fat as fuel to use during lower intensity activities like sitting on the couch watching Netflix and chilling, right? And so what ends up happening to your look, you end up smaller. You're not necessarily leaner, which is actually the opposite goal. So instead of saying, I want to be smaller, the goal is to look leaner. The goal is to have more muscle showing than fat. That is the lean, athletic look that we're all chasing, okay? And so when I'm talking to my clients and they want to go, oh, well, I think I should do a cut. Well, we need to discuss what we are actually cutting. And so I let them know that if we're relying on your workouts to burn off all of the excess carbs and the bad habits that you have on the weekends, the only thing you're going to burn out is yourself, right? The carbs themselves aren't the reward for a hard workout, right? You're not trying to earn a doggone thing back. But they are the fuel that makes those hard workouts possible. And if you want to experiment with this, I highly recommend it. Go for a 2 to 3 mile jog or a HIIT class. Don't eat anything before. Drink a little bit of water, electrolytes if you need to. Don't eat anything. Take notes on how you feel. Then in a couple days after you've recovered from trying to injure yourself, go back again and eat a fruit snack or a banana or a handful of gummy bears before you go into that workout, and let me know how you feel after. Because when you are able to flip that relationship between carbs are what is making me fat and carbs are the thing fueling my hard efforts so that I can lose fat, that's when everything else gets easier. And so when we're talking about how much carbs should you eat and when should you eat them, think of it this way. You're looking at 1 to 1.5 grams per pound of body weight. Ideally, you're timing that around when you're training. So if you work out in the evening, you essentially have all day to carb load. So you don't need to pound them in one sitting. You can just space them out evenly as you go. In the mornings, if you're training early, like I do, then you want to front load them. So you probably want to have a handful of something that quickly digests. So everybody knows I love a good gummy bear. This is where it works on my behalf. When I'm training early in the morning, handful of gummy bears, right to the gym, I'm ready to go. That's all I need. If I'm training later in the day, I'm probably not going to do that because I'm going to get my carbs that are slower digesting. So the oats, the potatoes, the starchy things, rice, that's going to be included in each meal, fruit, right? That'll be included. So then I'm locked and loaded. But the earlier you work out, the faster you want those carbs to digest so you can put them to work, okay? So that's carbs. Again, not the demon in this story. They're actually the underdog that if you use them at the right time, you're able to see a benefit, okay? And then fats. Oh boy, let me be very clear. I tell my dogs this all the time. Fats are good for your coat and nails. The same is true for humans. You need fats for skin health, for hair health, for hormonal health, right? Fat is the thing people cut back in the 80s when everybody went with the fat-free craze. Back when the devil's food cookies were the thing and, you just kind of didn't eat butter, you ate margarine, which ends up being worse for you because of how it's made. It's almost an industrial lubricant rather than something you should be cooking your food in. But when you cut fat, when you're initially trying to lose weight, that's the one that might actually be ruining some of your hormonal profiles. Okay, so fat and cholesterol, for that matter, actually support hormone production. So your hormones, test, estrogen, progesterone, estradiol, DHEA, sorry, blanked on that one for a second, right? So if you're a woman, these are the hormones that regulate your cycle, right? These are also some of the same hormones, ghrelin, leptin, all of the things in the digestive system that regulate hunger and satiety. So we have this connection between the gut and the brain, and if any of that is thrown off because our hormones are thrown off, because we're not eating enough fat, then that's where cravings come in, that's where mood swings come in. So if you cut things, especially fats and carbs together, you're going to feel it, right? You might experience mood swings. You might see your progress stall. Again, we're not relying on the scale. Hunger that doesn't, you're just hungry at odd times, right? And for some women who are experiencing relative energy deficiency syndrome, or RED-S, you may see a disrupted menstrual cycle if you're before perimenopause, okay? But we also have to remember there's a dark side to fat, because fat is the thing that makes food tasty. It's also the thing that makes food taste like food. If you were just to go eat, a piece of protein with no fat, it's probably not going to taste very good, right? If you were to take plain unflavored whey protein, especially the isolate version where they've taken all of the carbs and fats out, it's not going to be very tasty. Anything else like table sugar, no fat in that, also no protein. So these more pure sources of the macronutrients typically aren't very tasty. Where it gets a little hairy is when you go carbs and fats together, or when you go one by itself, right? But when we are talking about food, we're talking about things that usually have two, if not all three of the macronutrients. And when we include fat in our diet, it actually slows down digestion. Not to the extent that a GLP-1 slows down digestion, but it slows it down enough that you're going to feel fuller for longer. So when you pair that with protein, where you get a little bit of fat in with that protein, now you get rid of some of those cravings. And when we're talking about the micronutrients that go along with this, right, the vitamins and minerals, fat helps your body absorb vitamins A, D, E, and K. And it might sound like a bunch of alphabet soup, but we're talking eye health, bone health, skin health with those 4 micronutrients, okay? So when some people tell me that they're doing everything right, I'm not eating a bunch of fat, I'm, cutting this and that, and I'm eating clean. Typically eating clean means they're on a low-fat, low-carb diet, and they feel like garbage. I start looking at fat to make sure that they're getting what they need, okay? So if you wanted to calculate this out for yourself, for how much fat you could need, then it's 0.25 to 0.4 grams per pound of body weight. Okay, so if you're plugging all of this in, you're calculating your proteins, your fats, your carbs, and you're plugging it into a meal tracker, it's probably going to put you somewhere around the 1,800 to 2,000 calories per day mark. And before you go freaking out, understand that that is probably about the amount that you need to maintain your body weight. And that's where this idea of reverse dieting comes into place, because you're going to do that calculation, then you're going to see how much you're actually eating, and there's probably going to be a large gap in what you're eating and how much you should be eating. Okay? So we've been through the 3 jobs of each of the proteins, right? Protein builds and repairs muscle. Carbs are the thing that fuel your performance, and fat runs your hormonal signals, right? They all have their job. And when everyone's working, playing on the same sheet of music, they're in the right amounts, you feel great. But when you are within that deficit of here's where I should be eating for health and body composition changes, then you want to start working your way up to that, especially if that gap is pretty dang large. Okay? And so in my world, we call this a reverse diet, where you're closing the gap between where your maintenance should be and where you've currently been eating. And for some of my clients, it could be weeks, it could be months. It just depends on how big that gap is based on your calculated maintenance number. And the number in the app or in an app or any sort of calculator, right, essentially is going to be estimated for you. So unless you're living in a metabolic lab, you don't know what the actual number is, but you do know that you're working towards a number, but you're tracking your weight, you're tracking how you feel, you're tracking how you look. And a lot of times the scale starts to move in the right direction when you start fueling yourself well, especially if you've started training hard. Because when you start training hard, the training actually isn't the thing that helps you lose fat. It's going to be your diet. Now, the opposite is true. If you calculate your macros and then you compare it against what you've been eating and you've been over on that, then you're just going to diet down to what you should be eating and try to maintain that level of intake along with your training program. This is where the magic starts to happen, right? This is recalibrating your metabolism rather than stalling it out, right? Because you can only stoke that fire for so long, okay? Once you get into that maintenance phase and you're like, oh man, I'm feeling great. I've actually lost a little bit of weight. I know how much I should be eating. This is where that analogy of the pebble comes back into play. Because now you've taken your pebble and you've expanded it into this boulder. And now we can start chiseling away at the excess fat that you're carrying around. This is where those last 10, 15 pounds can start to come off. Because if you take your maintenance and then you decrease the amount that you're eating in fats and carbs by about 5% every 4 weeks, give me 3 to 4 months and you're going to feel and look very differently, right? Your clothes are going to fit differently. Your strength levels are going to be through the roof. Especially if you give yourself a little diet break here and there, you're going to be in a really good spot. But you have to remember, I'm talking months, not days, not weeks, months of sticking to the plan. Because then, once you get to a weight that you feel comfortable that you can maintain, then you recalculate that maintenance level of protein, fats, and carbs, and that's where you now eat at. So you don't ever get to a point where you're extremely restricted and you don't have anywhere else to cut from. You actually build up so that you have that level to cut from. And when you start moving some of your carbs around your workouts and you're including fats in your diets, you start to become more metabolically flexible. And what I mean by this metabolic flexibility is that you burn carbohydrates during your workout to fuel your workout so you can work harder. And then your fats provide you with energy the rest of the day. So we could go into a whole breakdown of what level of intensity drives what use of what macronutrient. Like, we could nerd out on that. I don't think we need to for this conversation. But I do want you to think about this. When you're working out, you're burning through carbs. It's the fastest, most efficient fuel out there, and it allows you to work the hardest. Fats are what's going to fuel your muscles and internal operations for the rest of the day so that you can refuel on your carbs to a certain point, right, to saturation, not oversaturation, because oversaturation leads to storage. And when you let this work for long enough, this is where I think most of my clients see success, right? They get to a point that if they wanted to lose another 3 to 5 pounds, it becomes a lot easier. Because fitness and diets become a lot easier if you stay ready than if you're always having to get ready. So this initial investment of time and dedication and focus on the reverse diet will pay off in the long run because you're able to build a metabolically efficient machine. Not to call us machines because we're dynamic beings, right? But so many people treat eating like, well, I'll flip the switch on now because I'm at home. I don't have anything planned, but oh shoot, I'm going to turn that switch off because I got a vacation, I got a wedding, I got all this, right? You move away from this idea of a switch to more of a dial, right? This is the standing way of doing things. You dial it up if you feel like you need to build a little bit more muscle. You dial it back from your maintenance level if you want to, get a little bit leaner. But the thing will be a little bit. We're not going to extremes. We're not using enhancers to do this. We're doing it naturally. And then the clients who see the fastest results, the most sustainable changes, are the ones who have given up on starting over. They have decided that this is the non-negotiable that they're going to run with, and that's what works for them. And in my article this week, I was talking about my one client, Carol. And we've been on this journey for about 10 weeks now. So it's awesome. She and I actually chatted about this last week. Before we started, she was maybe touching 100 grams of protein on a good day. We've built her up. She's up around 115, 120, almost consistently, even with the craziness that she's got going on in her life. She's got kids. They're active. They're running all over the place. She's taking care of the house. They've got vacations. They've got all this. So she's in a really good spot. But the way that we approached it with her was, all right, I need you to sit down and we're going to map out one macro at a time. And this is going to evolve. So I'll probably give you guys an update in another couple months on this. But the thing that we approached first was protein, the non-negotiable, right? Because she was starting to work out. I needed her to build muscle. And so we started with protein. The next thing that will attack are carbs. The next thing we'll attack will be then fats, okay? But if you just look at the one change that we made, she's been training hard, we only touched the protein. The results have been fantastic. Like, she was showing me her legs the other day on our video call. I'm like, all right, that's pretty impressive for 10 weeks of work, okay? Her legs are much more defined. Her clothes are fitting differently, especially in the waist and the boobs, because for women, that's the thing that changes last, really. But for her, it's been one of the first things that has changed. And now she's able to train harder without her back flaring up, right? None of this is a coincidence. She looks and feels and moves better. She's training harder than she ever has. And that just means the protocol that we started her with is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. So she's proof that even though the scale itself doesn't change, and while most people tend to focus on that, if you zoom out and look at everything else, so many more things have changed positively for her. And for living with someone whose husband is pretty beefy himself, like in a good way, let me clarify that. Like, he's a gym dude. Like, you talk to him, he wants to talk about gym. So we talk about gym, right? For him to notice the changes that she's experienced in these last 10 weeks is fantastic. That is the best validation that a spouse can get, because you guys spend just about every day together, right? It's hard to see some of those changes, but when it's time that they notice, that's a really good feeling, okay? And so one of the things that I've been reminding Carol with the last few weeks is you get what you practice. So even when she's felt like giving up on, tracking her protein or maybe skipping a day, the reminder is you get what you practice. Every day is practice. And if you're not practicing it, you're probably getting worse from skipping the work. It's just like when we were athletes. You want to get better at ball handling? You go practice ball handling, and you do it at a high level. You don't just phone it in and hope that you don't get the ball stolen when you're doing your workout, okay? Because at the end of the day, for us, we're all busy, right? I work, maybe my work is a little bit more casual than others, but we all have one thing in common. Our body is our business card. How we show up is the first thing that we get judged on, whether we're coaching basketball, we're training other people, we're working in an office, we're giving presentations, okay? It shows what you're willing to invest in yourself before it even shows what you're willing to invest in others, okay? So keep in mind, this is not about, a single good week or a hard training session. Like, it's what you do repeatedly. think Aristotle had a quote about you are what you repeatedly do, something very philosophical, right? And so as we're talking about this, and before I let you go, right, this is the one thing I see constantly. So many people start this process of trying to get lean. They're trying to lose fat. It starts working, and then they get distracted. They see someone else's transformation. They hear someone else's story. They're like, well, my story isn't aligning with theirs. It's not going to, because you are on your own journey. You're writing your own story. And I posted this quote a couple weeks ago on Instagram, and not that it's popular or famous or anything, but I was just like, we were walking the dogs and a bird flew over, and I was like, should I even look up at that? Because if you've walked outside and looked up at a bird, there's a chance that bird's going to poop on you, okay? So the rule that I've started giving my clients is that never look up to see the bird flying over your head unless you want to be shit-faced, right? Stay looking at your own plate, at your own numbers, at your own progress, right? Your horizon contains your destination. And comparison is the thing that draws you off track. And that's what forces people to abandon the protocol that was probably working for them. They may just haven't figured out the right measurement to notice a difference. So this week, I want you to walk away with something. I want you to remember that you don't need to lose weight. You actually need to build muscle. Hard stop, right? And to do that, you have to feed your body like it has a job to do, because it does. Your body supports everything that you do in your life. It supports your family. It supports your career. It supports taking care of your kids, taking care of your parents, volunteering. Your body is the vehicle for you to go and do the things that you love, okay? Don't miss the protein, manage your carbs, and actually eat fats, because that's going to help your coat and nails, remember? Okay? And if you're waiting for the right time to start, after the holiday, it's just July 4th, after this busy season at work, after things calm down, then you're already too late. Because that's like waiting for all of your laundry to be done to put on a clean pair of underwear, right? You start with what's in the drawer. Start now so that you don't have to look back in regret. And if this is the cycle that you've been stuck in, shoot me a message. Let's chat. Let's build your protocol. That's it for this one. Go eat something with a little protein, carbs, and fat in it. And we'll talk next time.